Stories, awakening, possibility, social impact. Creating a culture of compassion, connection, and collaboration. You are listening to Hollyhock Talks, a podcast about the teachers and luminaries that make Hollyhock extraordinary. Hollyhock is Canada's leading leadership learning centre, located on Cortes Island. Hollyhock Talks brings a little piece of Hollyhock magic to you, wherever you are listening. This is Farah Nasralli of Hollyhock Talks, and I'm honored to be here with Michael Rhodes, a spiritual teacher and best-selling author of Talking with Nature, Journey in Nature, Journey into Oneness, and Timeless Realm. He travels all around the world to teach people about enlightenment and love, and we're here specifically to talk about your Hollyhock program, From Illusion to Enlightenment. So I thought that I would start off by asking you specifically about illusion. What is the biggest illusion of our time today?
I think without any doubt, Farah, the biggest illusion in our life today is that we see everything as separate. We see everybody as separate from everything else. You know, we live in physical bodies, and we completely forget that we are immortal souls. And so most people live the separation, and with that comes duality. So in other words, a person is a body personality, but a mortal body personality, but they're also an immortal metaphysical being. And which do they spend most of their time on? We give our focus to about 99% on being a physical mortal being, and we give no thought or focus to being a metaphysical immortal being, which is what we are. That's our truth. And so the illusion is pretty complete. And when you consider that everything is energy, and that all energy is one, and that energy includes all nature, all humanity, even the planet, all one energy with a vast diversity of expression, we don't live that oneness. We talk about it, we intellectualize it, but to live it is something else. So we believe that we're physical bodies, we look out through the windows of our eyes, and we see everything outside of us. Everything seems to be out there. So for humanity, life has become an outside of self event. But the truth is that it isn't that way. Life is an inside of self event. But self, of course, is not the identity and not the personality. Self is one with all life. And so we live very powerfully. Everybody is separate from everybody else. It never occurs to us that what we think about other people is creating our life. What other people think about us creates their life. So if we have some pretty powerful negative, aggressive thoughts about another person, those thoughts and the emotions that go with them have no effect on the other person, but they will definitely mess up our own life. And so that's the way I see, the illusion as regards to humanity. I mean, it becomes very, very deep and very, very involved. Once you see everything outside of yourself as separate, then you can have wars, and then you can cheat, you can steal, everything like that, except all you're doing is creating your own future and affecting, in fact, also your own past.
Now, you mentioned something very profound that I'd like to dig a little bit deeper. You mentioned that we spend most of our times attending to the personality and the separate self. What does it look like to attend to and give time and focus to the immortal metaphysical self?
Well, that's interesting. Good question. I live with myself as an immortal soul. I'm aware of myself as an immortal soul. I talk to my body, and I talk to it from this point of the immortal soul to my body. So my body, for an elderly man, is very, very healthy, very, very powerful. I seem to have limitless energy, except when I'm working in 35 degrees Celsius, then that gets a bit hot. That gets a bit hot. But basically, I live and think and breathe as an immortal being. When I'm in the public world, then I'm an identity. And so I would say that I focus probably 60% on body personality and probably about 40% on being a metaphysical and immortal being. But in the end, I mean, to give you an idea what I mean, we have an English word, and the word is individuality. So if we slow that down a bit and give it a twist, then we have a word in divided duality. And this is how people live, in this divided duality. And so the duality is the physical body, personality, 99%, the metaphysical, immortal being, maybe 1%. Obviously, that doesn't work to our advantage. And so we incarnate over and over and over again, and the incarnations just continue the illusion. They just keep going. And so we now have a point where we've reached, probably for the 5th cycle of humanity, we've reached a point where we're moving now into change, big change. And we're really in interesting times, very much so at the moment.
What is this big change that's coming in terms of human evolution?
Well, in terms of the human, all life is the evolution of consciousness. And probably for the last, each cycle is approximately 200,000 years, with smaller cycles in that. Now, it's not set to be 200,000 years, but by the end of about 200,000 years, humanity once again seems to have lost it, lost the plot, lost their direction, and so it's a sort of wrap-up time. Now, we had, for instance, 2012, and 2012 is not just an event that happens. Let me create a metaphor for you. I'll explain it. Let's just say out in the universe, there is a hollow planet. And let's just say that it has a moon going round it, a couple of 3 moons, and they all have eccentric orbits. And about every 200,000 years, one of the moon, the eccentric orbit, makes it clip along the side of the planet, and so the planet then chimes like a bell. And that sound wave moves out through the universe. Of course, nothing can hear it, but it's energy and it's a frequency. And as it moves, it grows. And it grows so big that it creates literally a forerunning wave in front of it. Rather like a ship through the ocean, there is the forerunner. Well, that forerunner wave came through our galaxy probably in the mid-1960s and had an effect. Suddenly there was a change in music, there was a change, big changes in humanity. Flower power and sort of love. It had a big effect on humanity in the way we did things. Not everybody, not the heavy materialistic types, but the people who are more into their spirituality were very aware that something was happening. And then that faded away. There were echoes of it in the 80s and 90s. And then we came to 2012. Excuse me. And in 2012, you could say that the wave, before the wave came in the 60s, and the forerunner wave came in around 2012. Mind you, the big wave, and we're just talking a wave of energy and frequency, that's still probably 15 to 20 years away. So 2012, the frequency of everything on Earth lifted. Now, nature was ready for this. Nature had been, certain animals have been becoming extinct well before that. Now, there is no such thing as extinction. You know, extinction is exactly the same as death. We believe in death. We believe in extinction. So if you've got a book and you turn the page, you could say that everything on the last page has become extinct, which clearly it hasn't. And so in our one tiny frame of reality, because we don't experience very much of life, our tiny frame of reality, when an animal moves out, it's become extinct. There's no such thing as extinction. Consciousness draws to itself physical form through which to express, and that expression is consciousness. And when consciousness withdraws, we call it extinction, and forever. But of course, consciousness can re-express in any way it wishes through any animal or life form that it wishes. And so in 2012, there's a raising of the frequency. And as this frequency lifts, it affects every human being. It particularly affects our brain, the heart, and the pineal, which is not good news for us because we today have a very underdeveloped pineal. It's far less than it was, for instance, in the Paleolithic times. Anyway, this, therefore, is having an effect on humanity. So basically, it's an energy that's pushing us, propelling us in the direction we were already going. So if you were heading towards anger and aggression and want and greed, then that will push you farther and further, faster and further that way, which you can very clearly see is happening. And if you were moving towards compassion and love and care and concern for the people and the planet, then it would push you further in that direction. And so everybody is being moved in the direction of their consciousness is going. It's rather like in about another 15 or 20 years there'll be no fence sitters. People will either be into their spirituality far more deeply and growing in consciousness, or they will be completely out of that spiritual realm, facing into the much more materialistic. There's no right or wrong in any of this, because everybody's got forever as immortal beings. And so what I'm actually saying is that people who die right now will not just incarnate in the single stream of humanity and of human consciousness, because that stream is splitting. And as it splits, there's two different directions. This has happened before. This is round about the fifth time. As it splits, the two directions are towards, shall we say, newness and love, or towards fear and more of the same. And as you can see in humanity today, as always, the strongest direction is more of the same and fear, because it's so dominant in people's lives. And so they will incarnate into a stream moving that direction. There's no punishment involved here. There's no, you got it wrong. There's just simply, in a normal class, if one person doesn't pay attention, they have to repeat it. In a cosmic spiritual class, generally there's only one person paying attention, and the others have to repeat it. And so now, as I look around me and as I travel the world, this will be the 27th year, I see that there's probably more people moving toward the spiritual than there ever has been at one of these events. On the other hand, there are more people on the planet than is usual at one of these events. So the event is not like something short-term. It's an event that takes place over a very long period of time. But eventually, every event moves towards its climax, and we're moving into that area. So you're going to see a greater precipitation of aggression, wars, fighting, material grasping, and all that. And you're going to see a greater expression of those who are moving toward love and compassion and connection with people. So basically, that's just a brief summary of what's going on now.
Well, gosh, I hardly know where to go from here.
Well, it's a matter of everybody. I don't know whether you ever read it, but I'm on Facebook and I write a column I call Michael's Musings. You know, anybody wants to go on it, they just go on the Michael J. Rhodes page or the Michael Rhodes page. The Michael J. Rhodes is the public figure page, and Michael Rhodes is my personal page that's become very, very public. Anyway, I write these musings, and I'm always reminding people of truth and writing what I would like to think mostly as a bit of wisdom. But I always end it with ... choose love. I always end it that way. And that's the message I'm putting out to humanity. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are or what your situation. Today, mostly, fear chooses people and people react. People have a terrible relationship with fear. Most people have no idea what it is. So I remind people, it doesn't matter what your situation, you can choose love. It doesn't matter what confrontation you are in, you can choose love. It doesn't matter what your situation, you can choose love. And for many, many years, I counseled people. I do less of it now, but I did it for many, many years. And over the years, I've learned that there is no such thing as a human problem. There is only a lack of self-love. And what people don't realize, Farah, that in every moment of your life, you are creating the direction and the content of every moment of your life. Now, you just think about that. Every moment, there's no time out. You can have a cappuccino, you're still creating. So in every moment, our thoughts, and they're always accompanied by emotions, are creating. Unfortunately, around 90% of people live subconsciously with subconscious thoughts and sub-emotions. And so what they're creating is the past over and over because it's just like a program that keeps running. And so the only way you can choose love is consciously. You cannot subconsciously choose love because it doesn't happen. You can't do that. Your subconscious thoughts will never go there, and sub-emotions don't go there. And so you choose love. Now, love is the power of creation. And everybody thinks love is an emotion. That's one of the great illusions also. One of the very great illusions. People think love is an emotion. But love is the power of creation. So when you're choosing love, you are choosing the power of creation. And when you do that continually, the power of creation gets involved in your life. And when you're choosing love, you're choosing a whole higher energy. But people think that love is an emotion. If you're in an aeroplane and the aeroplane starts to fall out of the sky, you're going to get very fearful. But but then you're a fearful passenger. You're not an aeroplane. You're a fearful passenger. And so when you meet somebody and you fall in love, and love is that moment of a creative connection between two people, your emotions rise and they come up higher and higher to a very high level. Then we call that emotion love, but that's the emotion that rises towards love. So fear will take the emotions down and love will lift the emotions up, but neither of them are an emotion. Well, fear is an emotion, the lowest one you can get, but that isn't real, whereas love is.
So, choosing love in every moment of our life, in all our words and all our actions.
In every moment that is appropriate. I mean, you're not going to just think, I choose love all day. But every now and again, something might go wrong. Your car breaks down. And instead of sitting there swearing, you first of all, I choose love. Now that changes everything in that moment. Okay, today everybody has a cell phone, and so they phone for help. But when I was younger, if you broke down in the car, You just had to hope that a few other people came by. And so that's probably not the best situation. You're in a shop and somebody steps on your foot, and you jump, and instead of swearing at them, you choose love. And you can just smile and say, "Wow, that hurt." And then when they apologize, if they do, you can accept it gracefully. If they don't apologize and look at you aggressively, you choose love. So choosing love is not, "I now become a doormat." Choosing love is stepping into your own power. Choosing love honors you every time. And if you honor yourself, you are the world. These are things I teach in the intensive. You know, this is just a summary. You are the world. Now everybody thinks, how can I be the world? Well, then that's the identity thinking. And of course, the identity body, personality is not the world. But you, in fact, are the world, because all the world is one energy, all humanity is one energy, and you are the world. And so when you become aware of this and you choose love, knowing you are the world, then the world around you changes to meet your higher expression of love. We're creators. We're creating in every moment. So you might as well create what works. Probably 90% of humanity creates what doesn't work. And what sense is there in that? But you see, common sense today is extremely uncommon. So what we've done, we've got a highly educated public who have become so clever, they're stupid. Because clever holds hands with stupid. You've only got to look at the world's presidents, see how tactful I am, the world's politicians. You've only got to look at the way they behave under pressure in a parliamentary session. You've only got to look at the way they behave, and 90% of them have suddenly become like aggressive children, move back to kindergarten behavior. You'll see it on television of the Australian government, you'll see it the British government, I have no doubt the American is the same. You know, all these governments, they're not using intelligence. They're clever men and women who have no wisdom whatsoever. And clever means intellectually clever, not intelligent wise.
So you mentioned something earlier. There's no human problems, just a lack of self-love.
There is a lack of self-love. You cannot love anyone else until you love yourself. But you just stop people all your friends and ask them, you know, who do you love? And they'll give you a name. Do you love your grandchildren? Of course I love my grandchildren. Do you love your children? Of course I love my children. Do you love your husband or wife? Of course I love them. Do you love yourself? Well, I'm working on it. Well, the simple fact is, what they mean is they have emotions for all their family. They have emotions attached to them and stuck to them, but none of that is love. So there's nothing outside of self. That's another great truth. But again, that one takes some explaining. And so until you're loving self, fully accepting and loving self, then you can't love other people. I love who I am. I love myself. I love the identity I am. I love the personality. I love the spiritual being. I love every cell in my body. I am love, walking around in love with myself. Now, if people have a problem with that, so be it. But on the other hand, I've forgotten what worry feels like. I've forgotten what anxiety feels like. It's so long since I experienced them. I have no stress, never stress. I very rarely get tired. I can exhaust myself on a very hot day in the garden, but in normal life, I've forgotten what fatigue feels like, because it never happens, although I do need my sleep. I never get angry. I've forgotten the feeling of anger. I don't get angry. I seldom get impatient, although that can happen on odd occasions. So all the negatives that run our lives, I don't experience any fear whatsoever because I choose love. Why would I choose fear? And then I'm an immortal being, so what is it to fear? I certainly don't fear death because it's not an event. It's just the loss of a physical body. And everybody on this planet has probably lost about 10,000 bodies already. So what's losing another one? Why is that such a big deal? Because we're immortal beings and the soul moves on. And so I have no fears. And when you have no anxiety, no worry, no fear, no stress, no anger, no frustrations, none of those things, and there's a longer list, when you have none of those, you have good health, you have good energy, because you're not dissipating it or throwing it away. So all the energy that would normally go into those is mine in my daily life. And I find there's enough to go from when I get up until I go to bed at night. There's still some left over. And for most people, they're sort of burning out fairly early in the afternoon.
You've said so many profound truths in the course of this interview, and some of them, I think, take some time to digest.
Oh, absolutely. This is why, in a 5-day intensive, I never do more than an hour and a half in a session before we have a break, to allow people a bit of time to digest. But those intensives are life-changing. Nobody comes and goes away the same after 5 days. You couldn't do that. The only way you could do that is not participate, not be in the room. You couldn't do that. Everybody goes through growth. Some people, the growth is very profound. I've even had people come with cancer, and I haven't known that, and on the second or third day, they've gone into remission because their consciousness has changed so much. In other words, the consciousness that creates a disease is not the consciousness that can cure it. But if your consciousness lifts to a much higher level, then the disease is not dis-ease. And so it stops. And this is why we have such a vast amount of sickness on the planet, because everybody is living in a state called I call it out of harmony. Out of harmony is disease. When you're in harmony, which I'm pretty sure I'm in harmony, then you don't get any disease. I never get sick, I never get ill, I never get any of those things. In fact, every year I get older, I get healthier, which I rather like. And at 80, it's getting good. So people say to me, when do you plan to retire? I say, I'll retire when I can stand on the platform and look at the crowds and say, can somebody tell me what I'm doing here? And I don't expect that to happen, so I will probably be doing this for a good many years yet. I certainly don't see 100 as any reason to stop.
Wow. As you're speaking, I'm thinking about, the original architecture of the human being I've heard is so perfect. We were meant to live such long lives, and in modern society, we get sick so early.
That's right. Did you know, for instance, that all mammals live round about 7 times longer than it takes to develop their body? So like a quail, little bird, and a mouse, they're sort of developed in about 3 months, ready to breed, and 21 months, and they're old and die, although quail don't die quite that young. But human beings, it takes us 20 years, you could say, to develop our physical body. We won't even count the brain. That takes 26 years, and nobody ever develops a brain anyway because nobody's home. And so let's say 720 is 140. 140 years. Why not? Why is nobody 140? Why do rats and elephants and cats and dogs live there pretty much, well, not pets don't, but wild animals do? Why should they live their full lifespan and us about half? On an average, about half our lifespan. And it's because we kill ourselves. We kill ourselves with toxic thinking and toxic emotions, and we attack ourselves. People who think anger toward anyone, or any aggression toward anyone, or anything that's negative about anything in the day, that's all directed at themselves. It doesn't go out there. It goes directly inwards. Well, people don't survive that. And then we have now a belief, and remember, we create our own reality. So when you believe that you're old at 90, then you're very old at 90, because people believe it. I don't believe that.
It's remarkable because I know, as someone who studied yoga, there's plenty of stories about yogis who live very long and far longer than the average human life.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just a game we're playing. You know, we're living half lives. But then you see, when you live completely in an illusion, how can you live a full and enriching life? You can't. I mean, you can only live a half life because you're not really in life at all. You're not in a greater reality. You're living in a personal and consensual reality, and which is like a chicken run in a vast country. So people live their lives in the chicken run, and yet the country around them is empty. That country around them I call a greater reality. The greater reality is almost empty. And the thing is, it's so simple. God, it is so simple. People sort of think this is complicated. And when I talk, and I'm talking very simply, you immediately get it. And in your heart, you know what I'm saying is true. Some people want complicated stuff. You know, I'm not a complicated man. I'm a simple man. I see life simply, and I know that simple is powerful. And so I live my life simply and powerfully, and I watch it changing other people's lives. But most people live their lives complicated and at a frenetic speed. Hurry, 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 rush, rush, rush. Fear not having enough money, fear of this, fear of that. So they live short lives. And that doesn't make them bad or wrong. It's just the way it's become. That's become normal. That is now accepted as normal. Hospitals that can't be built fast enough to keep up with the sick and disease, that's considered normal. Whereas if everybody lived the way I'm talking, there would probably be one hospital in each state in America, or one in each province in Canada, and one in each state of Australia. But there we go. It's I just do what I do and speak what I speak, and ever-increasing numbers of people make shifts in their lives and begin to grow in consciousness. And the reason we're going into what we're going into is that life is the evolution of consciousness. Nature is the natural evolution of consciousness. Humanity is the creative evolution of consciousness. But we're not creating in a way that works. You know, we're creating toys and electronic gadgets, but we're not. But we still live exactly the same illusions.
So I suppose if we use the currency of love, then we could create a most marvelous, splendid world for ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We could, in fact, change, if humanity changed its whole frequency and it lifted, the frequency of the planet lifted, and we would no longer be three four-dimensional beings. We would lift a whole dimension. You see, everybody thinks we're three-dimensional. That's ridiculous. The only thing three-dimensional about us is our bodies. They are three-dimensional, but we're not bodies. And so the metaphysical beings we are fourth-dimensional. And so we're living a multi-dimensional reality, and yet trying to do it through a three-dimensional framework. It doesn't work. Like all your emotions, all your thoughts, all your imagination, all your intuition, all your feelings, put them on your hands, show them to somebody. You can't, because they're not physical. And so they're a higher dimension. You can see everything that's slower than the speed of light, we can see. Everything that is faster than the speed of light, we don't see. So what we see is 1% of what's on this planet. You know, we see 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum. 1%. That's called our vision. We hear about 1% of the audio spectrum. And so we live in this incredibly limited way, and yet we're metaphysical beings that can transcend all that. We can, as a metaphysical being, one can be anywhere or anyone or anywhen. I do that constantly, and written books on metaphysical travels. But you know, anybody can do this. Well, I say anybody. There's got to be no fear. There's got to be some practice. But everything is potentially, it's all there. It's, you know, we have the potential. But life after life, incarnation after incarnation, we don't live the potential. We live the illusion. So in the intensive, I teach people what their potential is, their full potential. I'm called a spiritual teacher, but to me, and I accept that, but there's two ways of life. One way that works and one way that does not work. Probably over 90% of humanity lives a way that doesn't work. That seems a bit ridiculous. I teach a way of life that does work, and I watch it work in people's lives. I watch it changing their lives, those who live it, because you have to live it.
Of course. You mentioned practices. Are there particular practices that you teach?
Well, in the intensives, I teach quite a number. But I mean, they're very, 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 very simple. I give people inner exercises they can do or not do, and whenever they feel that they should or shouldn't, that's entirely up to them. But to give you an idea here now, one of the things that I teach, for instance, not many people realize this on the planet, but the earth and all nature live in the conscious moment. There is no subconscious to them. When you live subconsciously, and only humans do this, you do not live consciously in the moment. You're not conscious of the moment because you can only think your way out of the moment. You can't think your way into the moment. And the average person is thinking 200 to 300 words a minute. So all that takes them out of the moment where life is, where all our power is, where love is, where God is, and so on and so on. And so the earth does not recognize a being that is subconscious. So we walk the earth and we have no connection with the earth whatsoever. Some of the indigenous people do, but we walk the earth subconsciously. And then in our game playing, we have a country called Canada and one called America and another one Australia, and we name them all and chop them up into states and provinces and counties. And then we say, I live in Queensland on a mountain and on the east coast, and separate it. To the earth, there is all one earth. So when you walk outdoors, you are on the whole earth, not a piece of it, because there is no piece. In the illusion, we live separation. Nature lives holistically. And so when you're awake, you live wholeness, holistic. So the earth is one holistic, we'll say, being, one vast holistic being. So you can't walk on a part of the earth or garden a part of the earth. When you have a garden, you're gardening the whole earth through the part. And when you become conscious of that and connect with the earth, then the earth connects with you. It's exactly the same with nature. I teach people how to connect with nature. Nature has no recognition as we walk around in our subconscious mode because we're not there. We're in some other place that doesn't exist. We're in the future or the past with thoughts. You can only think your way out of the moment. Well, all life is energy. So when you're not there in the moment, your energy is not in the moment. And so we create this strange phenomena which frightens wild animals of not being there, but physically being there. And so if you're conscious in the moment and consciously connect with nature, consciously reaching out through your hand chakras, connecting with nature, nature instantly connects with you. Nature will give you balance because balance will keep changing over the next 15 to 20 years. I don't mean physical balance, I mean spiritual balance, life balance, energy balance. But nature and the earth will always be in balance. A lot of people will go out of balance. So connecting with the earth and with nature so that it is consciously aware that you consciously exist and you are consciously aware that you're consciously connected, that makes a huge difference. Humanity is disconnected from life, from nature, from the earth. Everything else in life is connected because it's conscious. And so most of our problems in humanity, much of our sickness comes from our disconnection. And hugging a tree doesn't connect unless you're doing it consciously. And if you're doing it consciously, you don't need to hug the tree, because it makes no difference to the tree being hugged. The very fact that you're embracing it consciously with your energy, that's enough.
Mm-hmm. And what is the one thing that you hope people will walk away from your program with?
You know, I don't play the game of hoping that they'll walk away with anything. I spend 5 days sharing truth with them, and then I let it go. I'm a bit like Johnny Appleseed. I throw the seeds out on the land. I don't stand around waiting for them to grow. If it lands on fertile soil, those seeds will grow. No question. If it lands on infertile soil, the seeds will wait until the land is more fertile. And that's how I am. If the time, most people come and their timing is right, because I don't say to anybody, you've got to come. They choose to be there. And if they choose to be there, their timing is generally correct. Sometimes maybe twice, 2 people in a year got the timing wrong, and different countries, but that's okay. But no more than 1 or 2 in a year. Pretty well, 99.99% get it right. So what I say lands on fertile soil. Truth lands in a receptive energy. And then it begins to change. Things begin to change. I don't expect or want people to take up what I say home as intellectual knowledge. I want them to connect with it and take it home in their heart, in their greater energy field. And basically, whether that always happens, whether they want it to or not, it happens. And so something I said that they long forgotten, just at the moment that is needed, 6 months later will suddenly emerge into their awareness. Oh my God, that's how truth works. It's not fodder in the brain, it's fertility in the person's life, or nutrients in the person's life as they need it.
It's been such a pleasure and delight to connect with you and to hear you speak and to hear so many profound truths being said. It really reminds me of what they call in yoga tradition satsang, where it's a gathering of truth being spoken.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you.
Stories, awakening, possibility, social impact. Creating a culture of compassion, connection, and collaboration. You are listening to Hollyhock Talks, a podcast about the teachers and luminaries that make Hollyhock extraordinary. Hollyhock is Canada's leading leadership learning centre, located on Cortes Island. Hollyhock Talks brings a little piece of Hollyhock magic to you, wherever you are listening.